Next bill up is House File 4311, Department of Agriculture, Pollution Control Agency, Board of Water, Soil Resources. I think it's commonly called the Clean Water Fund Bill. Representative Hansen, would you like to move House File 4311 to be recommended to be referred to the Legacy Division?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move House File 4311 be recommended to go to the Legacy Division. Members, this is the last couple years we have had a second year bill or appropriation for a clean water fund because there have been funds in the fund for clean water. So what I did in this bill is I have a series of appropriations based on the amount that is projected to be in the fund available for spending this fiscal year. As members know, the Clean Water Fund is usually appropriated on a biennial basis, and there are recommendations that come from the Clean Water Council. The Clean Water Council made recommendations last year. I believe the Budget Committee has reviewed the remainder, but there is not a formal recommendation. So what this does is it appropriates $250,000 to the MDA for grants for Forever Green. We funded Forever Green last year. $492,000 appropriated from the Clean Water Fund to the PCA to adopt rules establishing water quality standards for PFOAs and PFOSs. The Clean Water Fund in the past has been used for regulatory activity. It was used for rulemaking for the Mississippi River critical area. It also was used for banning coal tar. And it was used for science in terms of LIDAR mapping the state to make decisions. So there's a variety of uses that have the precedent is there for some of these uses. This matches well with Representative Sandel's bill and provides funding for that rulemaking for PFOAs and PFOSs. There is $488,000 to the Board of Water and Soil Resources for permanent conservation easements and perennial vegetation and cover crops on wellhead protection areas. I think we've had testimony before that demand is high for that, and it prioritizes those with expiring CRP contracts. The Department of Health, $250K is appropriated from the Clean Water Fund to amend the health risk limit for perchlorooctane sulfonate so the health risk limit does not exceed 0.015 parts per billion. I believe that was Representative Wagenius had that bill in the past, I think. $1.75 million to the Commissioner of Health for addressing public health concerns related to contaminants found in drinking water for which no health-based drinking water standards exist, or developing and adopting health risk limits consistent with the capacity for monitoring drinking water. So again, drinking water is called out in the constitutional language, and this would appropriate funds there. $750,000 appropriated from the Clean Water Fund to the Commissioner of Health for studying occurrence and magnitude of contaminants in compliant and non-compliant private wells, including microplastics and nanoplastics. So this is in addition to the appropriation that occurred last year, and this would be looking for a broader assessment of plastics, microplastics, which this committee has heard several times. Metropolitan Council, $500,000 for inflow infiltration. Precedent has been set for that with high priority areas in the metropolitan area. And then $2.7 million would go from the Clean Water Fund to the Board of Regents for the study of water's role in transporting chronic waste and disease prions. And that was presented to Representative Lilly's committee, Chair Lilly's committee previously. So that is the bill, and I believe you have a spreadsheet as well.
Is there anyone in the audience like to testify for or against this bill? Member questions. Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hansen, did I hear you say that we don't have Clean Water Council recommendations formally? Is that correct?
Representative Hansen.
Mr. Chair and Representative Heinzen, my understanding is that the Budget Committee looked at and recommended from last year, but the full committee has not. If that's changed recently, I would stand corrected.
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also don't have LCCMR recommendations this year. Is this a theme this session, Mr. Hanson? Representative
Hanson.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair and Representative Heinzman, I think when there's very controversial things that are, they jam up the works and prevent recommendations from occurring. I believe with the Clean Water Fund, that is not the case. I believe that the money is there. And the legislature has in the past appropriated things and made priorities for those funds. I believe we've had funding for soil and water conservation districts that was not recommended by the Clean Water Council that has come in through the legislative process as well.
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I'm reading the projects, I see a lot of things that I think people like and appreciate. But one opinion is that if there's controversial projects, we can't seem to get the LCCMR or maybe other groups to come to an agreement. But then there's also another theory that maybe this is a tactic. People can decide for themselves what they think it is. I am curious if there is anyone from the agencies that would speak to their thoughts on this proposal. And if someone could come down, that would be great.
Representative Heinzman, I don't know if there's any comment from the agencies on this that, I don't see anybody jumping out of their seats.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to
Representative
go ahead and quantify that. Would MPCA please comment if they would, or DNR?
Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Greta Gauthier, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So could I have the question repeated, please?
Representative Heinzman, can you repeat the question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, just looking at the bill, I'm curious if you have any comment on the proposals here, if MPCA supports these projects.
Scott here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Heinzman. Thank you for the question. Agencies are not taking positions on proposals that have supplemental budgetary impacts because our position on the supplemental budget is the governor's supplemental budget. So in that light, I would say we don't have a position on this bill.
Representative Heinzman.
That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Backer.
More so a comment, Chair. One of the things I've talked to several folks, especially in my district, and clean water I know is important, and the SWCDs have done such a great job with that. And in the past, we funded those out of this. I think it's very important. I know there's people that would disagree, but they're the ones that are on boots on the ground. They're the ones that work with the landowners, and not just in the counties I represent, but across the state. So it seems to me that it would be prudent. I would hope maybe I would recommend you to consider, Chair, that during negotiations, if that comes up, that we should consider it. It does a lot with, those folks do a lot with the erosions and buffers and other projects and so forth. So it's more of a comment, so thank you. So I am disappointed that I'm not seeing any SWCDs in them, and thank you for considering that.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Kudelka, excuse me, Gauthier.
You didn't have lunch either, did you?
No, I didn't, as a matter of fact. But I did stay at the Holiday Inn Express last night. The House research document that's in our folders, the second bullet point, the $492,000 for the Pollution Control Agency to establish water quality standards for PFOAs and PFOS. If you were to do that within the agency, if that was a proposal, where would those dollars come from if you were going to do that?
Ms. Guthrie.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Fabian, I'm not sure I understand your question. This is not was not a governor's bill, and there is a fiscal note on it, I believe. I don't have that fiscal note in front of me, however.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, just my question is if the MPCA we're going to establish water quality standards for, in this case, PFOA and PFOS. How would you finance that in the agency to go through establishing those water quality standards? Where would those dollars come from? Out of which fund at the MPCA?
Ms. Gothier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, the legislature holds the purse strings and tells us which funds to use for various activities. But aside from that, I think that most of our budget comes from the environmental fund, which is supplied by the solid waste management tax and other sources. So I'm assuming that that would be a source that we could use in rulemaking on this topic.
Representative Fabian.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, so you said you're not taking a position on this bill. Is there anything in the governor's budget recommendations that is establishing water quality standards similar to what we have here?
Ms. Gothier.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Fabian, thanks for the question. The governor's budget did come out today, and for my agency, there are not supplemental items related to setting any water quality standards.
Thank you.
Representative Fabian. Any other member questions? Representative Lewick. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 3, subdivision 7, we're talking, what, $2.7 million to examine chronic wasting disease-related prions in waterways. Do we have any definitive information as to whether they exist today and to what extent?
Chair Hansen.
Mr. Chair and Representative Lewick, I think members of the Legacy Committee could probably answer that because they had the presentation. We did meet, there is evidence that prions can move in water. We have a variety of topography and geography in this state. And so meeting with the University of Minnesota, they originally came forward with a request for $3 million. We asked them if they could trim that, and so we had a 2.7 request. I think actually that's Representative Becker-Finn's bill, and she could answer that clearer.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually was next on the list because I was going to bring up this project. We did have a hearing on this. The U of M is ready to go, and they. I mean, basically what Representative Hansen just stated. There's a lot of factors that go into how it moves in water, and they also testified to the ability of the prions to come up in plants, depending upon the soil and how the water moves. And so we think this would have a lot of ramifications, both for the ability to use the water and the safety of the water going forward. They're more than ready to do the work, and I think Representative Heinzman had also stated his support for the project as well in Legacy Committee.
Representative Lewick.
Thank you. Understand, I guess, to kind of beat up the other programs, to this extent, though, it would seem this looks like a 5-year, in fact, I think it is almost, it's a pretty lengthy study, and from the perspective of it looks like it's going to take a lot of dollars away from other programs. It would seem like it would be appropriate to first ask some very tight basic questions, because this looks like a laundry list that you can employ a whole lots of folks on, and years down the road, not sure where, have they said that, well, if this, maybe I'm being wishful thinking here, but if this turned out to not be a big problem, they're going to stop and give the money back? I don't think so. I'll answer my own question. I just seems like this is a huge chunk. I'm not downplaying the need to take a look at this, but I think we need to base that on some pretty hard data of, okay, let's go out and see these prions right away and see where they're at right now. And I don't hear we even got that data.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure we can forward the materials from the Legacy Committee on to everybody else. I just wanted to state my support for the bill. I think, when we pay that little bit of extra tax for these funds, we want to see the dollars put to work, and I think these are some good projects, that go. It was kind of funny when the question was asked if somebody from the agency would step down. I was looking at the list and trying to figure out which agency we are referring to, because we're really hitting a lot of different wide range of things that are all, I think, important things for us to be working on regarding to water, whether it's in ag or health, Bowser, Met Council, U of M. There's a lot of important things we can be doing with water, and I thank Representative Hansen for bringing this forward this year.
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name came up, and so I'm going to go ahead and make a comment and just clear the air a little bit. So yeah, I did speak in favor of the proposal, and I continue to be interested, but I should mention that when Commander Lewick stops by my office, he might bend my ear a little bit from time to time, and I think he's got the right idea in regard to some of the concern on that proposal. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of it as we go forward through this process.
Any other member questions? Representative Hansen, or closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just in closing, if we have prions moving through water and they last forever and they can be transported in plants, we have got a huge issue. And the reason this is a 5-year, these funds can be expended for a long time to hire the best and the brightest, which is what we have a history of doing. We're going to need that long-term commitment. And so that's why that request is in here. And I ask for your support for this important comprehensive bill.
Chair Hansen renews his motion that House File 4311 be recommended to be referred to the Legacy Finance Division. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carries.